Welcome to the Call Your Shot podcast, your weekly sports recap podcast where we break down the hottest headlines, dissect the latest injuries, and serve up our own hard-hitting analysis of the past week in sports. But that's not all. We're not just here to talk about the past, we're here to predict the future as well. On the Call Your Shot podcast, we boldly predict the outcomes of the upcoming week's games.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening. This is the Call Your Shot podcast with your hosts, Alix and Drew. Today's episode, we're going to get into some of the games that happened over this past week that had a lot of playoff inclination. We're going to talk a little bit about seeding breakdown and how some of the potential matchups this week can affect seeding when it comes to the playoffs going forward, and finish off with a little bit of NBA and a little bit of college football talk. So, Drew, were there any games from this last week that you wanted to get into first?
I think first and foremost, the Saints. I'm still a Saints fan. As they won last week after I bet against them. It was one of those things, it's a win-win situation. Your team loses, you make money. If your team wins, then you're happy. So it's like, give and take.
Tried to double jinx them.
And it worked. I did that earlier on in the season, and they lost, which was nice because they made me money. And so I think this is just repaying the favor for betting against them earlier on in season 2. So
fair enough. So that means that you guys have a small chance to make the playoffs as well. Actually, to be a division winner if the Panthers lose and you guys win this weekend.
Yeah, and it looked like something that was very grim and far out of reach, but apparently, they're still going to go under their win total, which is, I can't even believe that, but they're going to win I can't say they will, but there's a chance. I don't want to jinx it, that they could win the division. So, yeah.
Yep. We are kind of in the same spot now, unfortunately, because the Seahawks ended up losing last week to the Steelers. So now we are no longer in control of our playoff destiny. We have to win this week against the Cardinals, and we have to hope for a Green Bay loss to, I believe that they are playing the Bears. So we're kind of in the same situation here. It's very unfortunate because last week I had a good amount of confidence in Seattle. But there was a lot of unfortunate upsets that happened this week that I did not predict. So now we are in kind of this weird limbo within the NFL, specifically in the NFC as well. But we're going to get into that. First, I wanted to, cover this game that happened on Saturday. This, terrible call that happened with the Cowboys and the Lions. Ended up being.
But you should be happy though. You called it and you got it. The bet.
Yeah, I got my points. I would have just taken the outright win. That would have been fine with me. I wouldn't have complained. But the Cowboys and Lions ended up being a solid game, and then ended up coming down to basically the last possession. The Lions went down and scored, and they were down by 1 point. So instead of kicking the PAT to potentially go into overtime, they're like, nah, we going for all of it. And they convert on the 2-point conversion. And then, about 5 seconds later, after it's called for a 2-point conversion, the refs call the flag and say that the tight end linemen did not report as eligible. So ended up being illegal touching. And they called
back. Along with that though, I forgot who the guy in New York was that was talking about it, like one of the refs and stuff, but he had mentioned that they were also they were uncovered, which means that the lineman or the tight end didn't have a wide receiver that was on the offensive line that was in front of them as well. So they weren't in line with the line, so to speak. And so they were also ineligible in that sense as well. So in terms
that was
of
not the call.
Well, true. That is true. But there was also that penalty that they didn't call, but there was also that. So to be fair,
getting arrested for speeding, and then they find drugs. Be like, well, I wasn't. Well, you shouldn't have arrested me in the first place. Like, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. I do not like the Cowboys. For those of you that are still wondering. Anyway.
Yep. Well, I don't want to say that I told you so, but that division, it's locked up.
I know. Just please keep talking. All of this, you say it's locked up, and then I'm just gonna watch these Commanders. Actually, it would be so fitting if your boy Sam Howell ended up kicking you guys out of the division lead. That would be so fitting. But yes, the Cowboys now basically control their own destiny to win the division and are probably the very likely favorites to win the division, as they basically now just need to win against the Commanders this weekend or have a Philly loss to who do they play? I believe the Giants. So very likely that the Cowboys do lock up this division, and Drew would win his bet. I think it was one of the first bets that we made before we started this show. And I think there was about 4 times throughout the season when Drew basically was ready to concede. Unfortunately, he did not, or maybe he did. I just didn't hear it. But we still had the bet going. So as of right now, the Cowboys look very likely to lock up the NFC East. Unfortunately,
I never wavered, never at all.
Yeah, kind of like your Bills pick.
Yeah, same with the Bills. I never wavered.
Yep.
So I had complete and utter confidence in the Cowboys the whole season. This is the team that we knew that they were going to be going in, and it just showed that
here we go.
they're exactly. So yeah, I mean it was a great season for the boys, and they'll probably be out in the first round. So
you think they're going to be out in the first round? You had them in your NFC Championship originally.
Well, yeah, but it's classic Cowboys nature, though. Make the playoffs and then just get bounced. So, like, I'm optimistic.
I mean, they would make it out the first round because, like, ideally, if they win this week, then they would have the first round bye.
True. Okay, well, they're gonna lose their first game that they play. How about
losing
that?
The divisional? Oh boy!
Because for some reason, I don't know, maybe they're cursed or something. Maybe they had like a deal with the devil so they could win all those championships early on, and then now they're just like, you can't win for the next 30 years or something crazy. I don't know, which is doing some crazy things, but yeah, don't need to get into witchcraft and wizardry here.
Last Cowboys championship was 1996, so I think right before you were born, Drew. So there you go.
Yep, actually, it would have been almost a year on the dot because I was born the day after the Super Bowl in '97. So
there you go. Additionally, we did, as we kind of mentioned, the Eagles did end up basically shitting the bed, losing to the Cardinals after they were up, I believe, 21-6 at one point in time, trying to, reemerge the career of Julio Jones with his 2 touchdowns in the game. And then in the second half, the Cardinals went on a 29-10 run and ended up walking down the Eagles in order to win the game. So now, ironically, the Cardinals, who are one of the worst teams in the NFL, have wins against the Eagles and the Cowboys this season somehow. But I digress. So it was very weird.
This game was kind of interesting too because Kyler, we talked about this last week, like Kyler was coming in with an illness, and a lot of the players that came in with that same illness, we're not sure if it's the same one, but came in with an illness. They saw a pretty significant drop in performance and production. And so a lot of people were expecting that same thing to happen. Kyler was like, nah, bro, I'm good. I was just up too late playing Call of Duty. So he just rolls out of bed and has like a 116.7 QB rating. Those are 3 touchdowns. Had a pick, but 3 touchdowns, that'll do it. Only got sacked 1 time.
It was basically the Cardinals completely controlled the trenches, so they were able to keep Kyler Murray clean. As you mentioned, only 1 sack. Kyler had a great completion percentage, as you mentioned, and then the Cardinals just proceeded to rush for 220 yards. So
that was a big thing too. Is that that's like one of the keys to beating like these big favorites in games is if you can control the time of possession, then you're always going to be at least in striking distance. And Jonathan Gannon, being familiar with the Eagles and their offense, what they like to do, I think that definitely played a factor as well. Because, you go from being on that team and knowing what their tendencies are, they're not going to overhaul the whole, like, what they did last year because they went to the Super Bowl. So like, he knows what they like to do, all their tendencies. And the Eagles are more at a disadvantage because he goes over there. They don't know what he likes to do. They never seen him coach before. This is his first time doing it. So they kind of have that advantage as well. And like I said, you see this when people play against Mahomes, people play against Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen.
Their possessions.
Exactly. So, because ultimately, it gets very difficult to stop their offenses. The best way to stop it is to not give them the ball. So the Eagles ended up having 20 minutes and 21 seconds of possession, while the Cardinals almost had 40 minutes of time of possession. They had 39 minutes and 39 seconds. So That'll do it.
Facts. Basically, lastly, coming out of the NFC, the Rams ended up getting a squeaker against the Giants, ended up winning 26-25, and pretty much have secured their spot in the playoffs. I believe that they've secured their spot as the number 6 seed. The Packers are the number 7 seed, and the Seahawks are number 8. So if the Packers win this week, then they basically secure the last spot in the wild card. So that's pretty much everything out of the NFC. In the AFC,
And you want to talk about your boy starting?
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. The
For
GOAT's
the
coming
Rams,
back.
right?
GOAT is coming back. Carson Wentz is going to be starting for the Rams, everybody. Matthew Stafford will be sat for the last game. I think it was like so under the radar too, because like once everything happened with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and stuff like that, they're like, oh, should they get Carson Wentz? Should they get this and stuff like that? And then just, under the radar, the Rams signed Carson Wentz. Yeah, midway through the season, nobody talked about it because they're like, Matthew Stafford and stuff. But now he's gonna get gonna take over. Gonna take over.
Actually, to say nobody talked about it, we talked about it on the podcast a little bit earlier. So just another reason why you should be listening to us every week. But and then on top of that too, can we talk about Kyron Williams? Like that dude, I don't know.
He honestly is the offense. Like it goes through him. He's nice. I like him.
So it's one of those things too where I was like, okay. The one of the ways that the Giants are vulnerable is on the ground. Like they don't have a very good run defense, so they're probably going to be doing that quite often, and they're also going to be likely leading. So it makes sense that Kyron Williams is going to get a lot of touches, get some yards. And then I go to see his prop, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, why is it so high? It was up at 92, and I was like, God, man, like what has he done? Like, did they tell them that he's going to be getting the ball every single time? And then I go and look back at the game log, and then I see this is before this week coming up 104, 152, 114, 88, 143, 158. Like, I mean, and then all these two, he's getting the touches, he's getting the bulk of the work, and he's the new. I almost called him Melvin Gordon. Who was your boy that always ended up beating me in the championship?
Todd Gurley.
Yep, Todd Gurley. He's the new Todd Gurley, I think. Because 3 touchdowns, 87 yards this week on 20 carries. Even had a couple of receptions out of the backfield. Didn't hit his prop, but 87 yards and 3 touchdowns like that. I'm not complaining.
That'll do. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last week. There weren't too many workhorse running backs. We brought up Christian McCaffrey. Like he honestly has been a workhorse running back for them. Went through injury about midway through the season and stuff, but like throughout the whole season, he's top 10 in carries, yards, touchdowns, and about 1,400 all-purpose yards. So he's honestly been great for them. Remember you talked about it like earlier in the season, like you were kind of like a year late on him because like this is his sophomore season, right? And that a lot of people were talking about him his rookie year, and it didn't really kind of come to fruition. And then a lot of people thought Cam Akers was going to be the guy coming into this season, and basically he completely beat him out. And then after week 2, the Rams were completely ready to get rid of Cam Akers to be like, okay, it's completely your backfield. You're the guy. And there's been about a few games this year where he's the only running back that's gotten touches out of the backfield. So like they are using him as a workhorse.
Exactly. And it's obviously working. Like you have that dynamic offense, and like that's definitely one of those teams that I don't want to see in the playoffs. Like if I'm in the NFC for sure. So because everybody, I don't want to say everybody, a lot of people had them as one of the like lowest rated teams this year because of all the rookies that they had coming in and all the turnover that they had. And on defense, really they only had Aaron Donald. So like, and then on offense, they had Cooper Kupp, but he was hurt for half the season. And then you have an aging Matthew Padford, and then they're like, okay, who's this Puka guy or whatever? Shoo him away. And so now like it's like, oh shoot, okay.
You're scared of the Rams now with all the trash that you talked about Matthew Stafford and stuff. Like, did you forget what he did in the playoffs last time? You know what I'm saying? The Super Bowl run. And, Matthew Stafford, like, he hasn't been the greatest, but he's a pretty solid season overall. He's at 4,000 yards right now. He's top 10 in touchdowns. He's top 5 in QBR. Like, I don't know what you want from him. Hasn't had Cooper Kupp all season. Puka Nacua has been hurt in and out every once in a while. You know what I'm saying? Like,
so So I did two things during this game. One, I took the Giants because me and Matthew
With
Padford
the points?
have a rich history. Yeah, I took
Okay.
6.5.
There you go.
I I would have been so mad if I took money line and it ended like this.
Got greedy.
Um, yeah. So 6.5, and it was delicious.
Okay.
But on top of that, I also did take the over with uh Matthew Stafford Padford. Can't call him Stafford. It's not his name. Matthew Stafford passing yards which was 250, which I thought was extremely low for a pretty below average secondary as well. For that being the Giants, and the game was expected to be a pretty high scoring game. And well, looking at it there, that looks like a pretty damn high scoring game to me. So points expected, and Matthew Stafford doing what he doing what he normally does. 1 touchdown, 2 picks. But he hit my prop, and that's all that really matters. I am coming around on the idea that he is a above average quarterback. He's an above average quarterback.
Okay.
He has grown his way out of average, and he has improved to above average. So I can respect that. And yeah, so that's all he's getting from me. He's not getting any more flowers. He's getting, I don't know, he's gonna be getting some weeds or something.
I mean, as much as you
Some
love
crabgrass.
the Bills and you dislike Matthew Stafford, as much as you like Josh Allen, like passing wise, they literally have identical stats. Like,
That's fine.
what?
One of
I
them
don't
has just been
And the same
backpacked
record.
by good receivers.
I mean, Stephon Diggs is
Well,
pretty good. Now, I don't
Stephon
think
Diggs
Josh
hasn't really
Allen
been.
was making any All Pros and Pro Bowls and all
Uh,
this kind of stuff until
hold the phone.
Stephon Diggs. I'm
Hold the
just
phone.
saying.
Let me pull up Stephon Diggs stats this year. Because I had the over on his receiving
Oh no,
yards
it's been bad.
because
It's been bad,
yeah,
and he's frustrated too. But I'm just
and
saying, over
I
the past 3 or 4 years, just saying,
okay, he's not Megatron though, like you know what I mean,
he's
and
a great
and
receiver.
also okay, but he's not getting like the yards
He's
after
not
catch like
Megatron.
Cooper Kupp is and everything, like you throw the ball
Fair.
like a 3-yard slant every route, and then Cooper Kupp just runs 75 yards. Like
Okay.
it's
You say Matthew Stafford doesn't throw down the field at all? This
he
is not
does. Like
this is
he
not
has
what this episode
like,
is. This is not a Matthew Stafford debate. We've had too many of these this season. We're moving on to the AFC. Goddamn it. Okay.
oh my god.
Anyway,
Side note, real
we
quick. Stephon Diggs. This is over the past few weeks. So 26 yards, 29 yards, 48 yards, 24 yards, 74 yards against the Eagles because they have the literal worst secondary in the league. 27 yards, 34 yards, 86 yards against the Bengals, who also have a below average secondary. And then we'll not need to talk about what happened before that because he was actually pretty good before that. But so I rest
he's
my
had a
case, Your
couple
Honor.
good games over the past few games. Cooper Kupp has had 27 yards, 52 yards. He had 2 games where he had over 100, but then he had 39,
Dude, look at
18,
Puka.
11, 11, 48.
Look
I
at
don't care.
Puka's dude. Like
I don't care.
you make it seem like Puka's just like some scrub out there, just some bum. Like
Is
he's
Dalton
throwing
Kincaid
to
a scrub?
yes, he's
Oh,
not Puka.
what? Okay.
Dude, you're telling okay, who would you like, game on the line, are you throwing it to Puka or are you throwing it to Dalton Kincaid?
No,
Like,
I'm
come
not
on.
saying like I'm saying that the Rams weapons versus the Bills weapons, I'd probably give the slight nod to the Rams, but it's not some huge disparity. If you have Stephon Diggs with Gabriel Davis, with Dalton Kincaid, with James Cook, and then you have, obviously Kyron with Cooper and Puka, and
I don't know if Gabe
Higby.
Davis is good or not. I don't know. He
He's a
throws me
good deep
off
threat. Yeah, he's very hit or miss.
sometimes. Anyways, moving on.
Moving on to the AFC, one of the marquee matchups that we had out of the AFC was this Dolphins Ravens matchup that a lot of people thought was going to potentially be a shootout, but a lot of people thought the Ravens were going to win with good reason, and it ended up being a complete blowout. Kind of
Lock it
resembled the
up.
game that Lamar had a couple years ago to open up the season, where he basically threw like 5 or 6 touchdowns against the Dolphins, and he's like, let me just do that real again. So it was 56-19, complete mollywop. And
it wasn't even really that close.
facts. It was a complete mollywop, and the Ravens now are 6-0 over the past 6 weeks and had wins against the Dolphins, against the 49ers, and they just look like the best team in the league. But as we were talking previously before the show started, like, I don't know what it is. Like, I'm not. It's not like I'm not sold. I think the Ravens are a great team. I think they're the best team in the AFC and an understandable, Super Bowl favorite. But like, I do. I don't think that they're just this ginormous juggernaut team. Like in the playoffs, I don't see like. I don't know. I don't think they're unbeatable. I think that if the 49ers would have had this same type of record going into playoffs, I would have had much more confidence in them, because when I look at their roster from top to bottom, offense and defense, I can understand it. The Ravens, they're playing great. They're playing great defense, and then Lamar has had a good amount of weapons, and they're beating these teams. But I mean, I just don't see them as a juggernaut or unbeatable.
I mean, yes, I hear you and I get that, because it's like, the dynamic of having all these like, elite players on the team that the 49ers have. And you see that, and you see how their A game is the best A game that's out there. But then you go to the other side, you see Lamar Jackson, and then you see
MVP.
an aging, and you see an aging Odell, and then you see like a Zay Jones out there too, and Bateman, and it's like, who are these guys?
Flowers,
and Mark Andrews is or did I say Zay Jones? My bad, Zay Flowers, yeah. And then Mark Andrews is out, so it's like, who are these people? Like, who are we throwing to?
Respect to your boy Isaiah Likely yet? Back up, he's been balling.
I don't know. I never like. I get it. Like, he's athletic, he's good, and but I don't know. I've just been hurt too many times picking him up last year. So,
he won a lot of people some championships this year. He filled in formidably as a good tight end.
I have a vendetta against him, so that
fair enough.
Which has nothing to do with his talent. So, but yeah, so it's like, you have all these players that seem like nobodies, but they play very well and they play within the system. And I think that's why it works so well, is because you have a new OC, Todd Monken, coming in, revamping the whole offense. And at first they weren't having Lamar run as much, and he was kind of playing stiff and rigid and not very free, kind of like what was happening in Buffalo as well with Josh Allen. And then as the season progressed, you have them becoming more familiar with the type of offense that they're running and kind of just trusting the process with Todd Monken. And like, he's shown that this offense can work, and from what he said, like, during his press conferences, is that the way that he runs the offense is the way that it can be the most unstoppable offense, because of all the different play actions that they run, all the different motions and schemes that they do, and all the different hidden patterns that they have as well. You can't necessarily scheme for every single wrinkle that they have to a play. And early on in the season, the timing was off. Like, Lamar was getting frustrated because he would throw it one way and the receivers running a different route, so they weren't really on the same page. And now we're seeing, over like the past 8 weeks or so, that they're starting to figure it out and they're really starting to turn it on. And the defense, that's always been a staple for them. They've always locked that end of the field down. And I mean, like, they're the only team that's ahead of them right now in EPA per play is Cleveland. So
Seahawks.
Like, stop. This is on defense, especially not the Seahawks on defense. Let me scroll down to where are they down there?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you when it
29th.
comes to the Ravens.
29th.
Anyway,
EPA per play.
I'm saying, like,
Interesting.
But that's what I'm saying, though. Like, we talked about it, you talked about it earlier. Like, these good teams, if you have a script to beat them, whether it be your defense, whether it be establishing a good running game, it's a possibility that you can knock off one of these teams in the playoffs. And like, I'm not saying that this team reminds me exactly of the 2019 same Ravens. Back when Lamar was on his unanimous MVP run, they went 14-2. They had big wins against like Tom Brady and the Patriots when they were still their dynasty, things of that nature. And then they lose in the divisional against the Titans, who are like a 9-7 team, just because they had a game plan. They played great defense, were able to contain Lamar, and then they just gave the ball to Derrick Henry 74 times and basically just ran the air out of the ball. I would not be surprised. I'm not saying that the Bills or potentially even the Browns have the same type of script, but like I would not be surprised that in the Bills face the divisional or the Ravens in the divisional, if the Bills were able to win, like I would not be dramatically surprised. I would be a little bit more surprised if the Browns ended up doing it, but they have the defense to do it. So while I do think that the Ravens, as mentioned, are a good team or a great team and probably the best in the AFC and should be the favorites to come out of the AFC, I don't think that, which is why I think this season has been great. It just seems like there's so much disparity and you really don't know who is going to come out. But Lamar does deserve his respect. He should be the MVP, especially this is coming off of the offseason that he had when he had so much frustration with the Ravens trying to get the contract and, kind of testing the market when it comes to trades and stuff like that. And nobody showed like super major interest in Lamar Jackson. Now coming back once he's been fully paid, once he's been secure and he has the contract to come out and have this MVP season that he has, it's a lot of respect to him.
And I mean, you come off the game against Brock Purdy where it was like a head-to-head MVP matchup, and Brock Purdy throws up a dud, and then you have Lamar Jackson comes in, just lights the world on fire, and then the next game after that, it was like, okay, maybe it was just like a really good game, bad matchup for the 49ers and everything. Nope, he does it again. He goes out there, 5 touchdowns, 321 yards, no picks. Even had a bomb 75-yard pass as well too. So only got sacked one time. Perfect QB rating. Like, if you could slam the door in somebody's face like that is what that looks like. And I think that it was. I was gonna say I think that's one of those things too where, like the players know what's at stake. The players know what's going on in the media and the voting and point spreads and stuff too. The Ravens specifically talked about being disrespected last week, or I guess now 2 weeks ago, when they were playing against the 49ers and being underdogs. And so I think that the team knows that Lamar Jackson, still hadn't necessarily secured that that MVP race against Brock Purdy. And so what do? They do everything in their power to make sure that man wins the MVP, and that is exactly what they did. And the Ravens are one of those teams where no matter what, they always are going to play hard. They're always going to get up for every game, which is why like coming up this week where they're going against the Steelers, and they have Huntley playing, but there's nothing that a Harbaugh loves more than winning, and they're going to do everything possible to do it, which is why they sometimes cheat to do it, but that's okay. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right?
So this is facts. Lamar has completely secured the MVP. As you mentioned, he won't be playing. It'll be Huntley this week against the Steelers. But regardless of what happens, if they win or lose, they have locked up the AFC as the number 1 seed, and they have secured that bye. So they have the first round bye and are looking on to the divisional. They've already talked about Mark Andrews looking for a return as soon as the divisional round in the playoffs. So in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and having him back. I'm not exactly sure how it would work, once the offense has been clicking for the past, as you mentioned, like 8 weeks. But I mean, I don't think it would hurt adding one of the best tight ends in the league to an already high-powered offense. Can't really hurt.
Facts. 100%.
Additionally, we had the Bills taking care of business against the Patriots. So basically, they have a opportunity to either be the number 2 seed. Though. It was. I don't know what it is. It's the Patriots and the Cardinals. Like they're just like, you know what? We just like to, cause havoc. We just like to just hurt people's feelings. So like, we're a bad team. We're going to lose all these games and stuff like that. But when there's a game that you absolutely need to win, we're going to make you sweat a little bit or potentially beat you like the Cardinals. So the Bills are now in position to have a playoff spot, but it is very weird. So as we mentioned multiple times over this podcast, we thought that the division would come down to the last game when it comes to the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills within the AFC East. That's basically what it's come down to. Miami's currently sitting as the number 2 seed. The Bills are sitting as the number 6 seed. If the Bills beat the Miami Dolphins, they would be the number 2 seed and win the division. But if they lose, there's a potential that the Bills are completely out of the playoffs, as the Colts and the Texans are right behind them, and the Steelers. So I remember we were talking about it, before the episode started. There's a lot of different ways that the AFC and NFC can shape up, but this specific matchup could shape up a lot of the AFC when it comes to the rankings and when it comes to completely knocking teams out of the playoffs.
Yeah, so with this game, it's actually, let me back up. With all the games in Week 18, like they're all just gross, honestly. And I don't really want anything to do with them, to be
Facts.
quite frank, because there's so many different factors that go into it. Like you got an interim coach that's, oh, actually, I want to play for my job, or it's like a Lovie Smith situation. I think it was last year, 2 years ago, where the Texans, they, if they lose, they get the number one pick. What do? They win, and then they
Hmm.
ended up getting the number two pick, which actually ended up being a lot better than having Bryce Young on your team. So,
True.
maybe
CJ
it's
Stroud.
a benefit. Yeah, and then I mean, even regardless of like position that you get in the draft, like it doesn't really matter because quarterbacks aren't necessarily like the higher that you're drafted doesn't necessarily equate to a better quarterback, as we've seen in years past. Like Lamar Jackson was 32nd um, overall draft pick. So,
True
and
Lance.
then yeah, exactly. Point proven. Anyways, going back to the game, um, I think that this is, if anything, in this game, I'm going to take the under. It's at 49.5 right now, and there's supposed to be about 20 miles an hour of wind. Supposed to be some pretty heavy wind, and if I know Josh Allen like I think I do, he's going to be slanging that thing like he always does. And sure, he has a howitzer for an arm, and he'll be able to rip through the sound barrier and a little bit of that wind as well. But I do think that it's going to affect the passing game overall, and it's going to lead to a decrease in offensive output, along with the fact that you have some key injuries with the Dolphins, and they're going to be playing a lot tighter. It's a divisional game. It's for, basically, if the Bills win, then they're in the playoffs. And if the Bills lose, they're out of the playoffs. And then the Dolphins are the AFC East champions. So this is a pivotal game for both squads. But the only way I can look at this game is for the under, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and like your guess is as good as mine as what's going to happen. Because the Dolphins, they never get up for big games. We saw that the first time that they played them, and we saw that last week and weeks before when they played against top competition. They always just stub their toe. Something goes wrong. They're never able to figure it out. So why would it change now? The only difference is that they're at home, which is good, but they're also at home against the Ravens. You saw how that went. So
Yeah, it is definitely a weird situation. So I think there is a chance that if the Buffalo Bills do lose, that they can still make the 7th seed. I think because the Colts and Texans are playing each other, so one of them is going to lose. But if Pittsburgh also loses, and I think they still can be in the 7th seed, but that's not very
mm,
likely. So as long as they win this game, they're in the playoffs. But it's kind of weird to be like, oh, okay, you could basically have a first round bye, or you could potentially completely be out of the playoffs off of
legit.
off of one game. So we've talked about it all season. The volatility of the Bills, they've been up and down, and this is their chance. They've gone on this very very good about 3-0 run to close out the game and or to close out the season, and this is when you want to start getting hot. So if they're able to beat the Dolphins, who they're favorited against, and Jalen Waddle, who didn't play last week against the Ravens, is now very questionable to return this week. As he's battling through his ankle injury, that's just even more reason
Mm-hmm.
for them to be able to win. And they're playing at home, as you mentioned. So you know,
I,
it,
my so normally the way I would look at this game is that it is probably going to be one of the most heavily bet on games, right? So typically you want to be on the side of the house, not the side of the public. However, the bet splits right now, they're basically 50-50. It's 54% on the Bills and 46% on the Dolphins. Where I'm looking at this game, though, is Bradley Chubb got hurt last game, and that is
an
a
ACL or something like that.
huge piece. I believe so, something along those lines.
I'm pretty sure
Not
it
sure.
was, but yeah, I'll look it up.
Yeah, so
Yeah, Torres ACL.
he's gonna be out. Oh yeah, so he's definitely not coming back. So
So he's out.
um,
Waddle's potentially out. I mean,
mhm. Even I mean, Tua's a little banged up too. Mostert's still banged up. I mean, sure, everybody at this point in time in the season is banged up, but
mhm.
to have your major offensive players and defensive players as well to be injured for the most pivotal game, I don't think it's going to be a very good situation for them. Like honestly, I might
I don't
I
care.
might just
All
lock
this
it
that
in
you've been
now.
talking about this, the Bills and stuff like that, you better be picking the Bills. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. No, you need to take the Bills.
Yeah. Fine. I'm
+3.
taking the Bills. No, okay. I'm not.
+3.
I'm not taking the points.
How is it only
I
+3 though? The Bills are at home.
well, yeah. Well,
The Dolphins
or
are playing
the
without
Dolphins are at
Waddle.
home.
Oh, okay. The Dolphins are at
Dolphins,
home. Okay, that
yeah.
makes more sense.
So
Okay,
Bills
that makes
Bills
more
are
sense.
3-point favorites. Yeah, 3-point road
That makes
favorites.
more sense.
So interesting thing about this though is that the Bills initially opened up as a 1.5-point underdog.
That makes
Now
no
they're up
sense.
to a 3-point favorite.
Yeah.
So it's that dog to favorite line move, like I talked about multiple times on the podcast before. It just shows that there's respected money on the side of the Bills that be able to move that line, as well as some a little bit of public betting as well. But like I said, it's 50-50 bet split, and the line shouldn't move ideally if it's level on both sides, right? However, 67% of the handle is on the Bills. You know what? Give me the Bills. Bills money line. I'm not doing that minus thing, especially not in a divisional game of this caliber and everything too. Yeah, minus 162 money line. I'll take it, and also take the under 49 and a half. Had the under in the in that Ravens game as well, but
No. Yeah, if I were to
yeah,
take if I were to take somebody in that game, I would definitely take the Bills as well. The only last one that I kind of wanted to get into was the Chiefs ended up beating the Bengals. Obviously without Joe Burrow, as Jake Brown has been playing, but they were able to wrap up the division. So even on a weird season where Patrick Mahomes has been far from what we expect from him, and battling through Kadarius Toney playing for the other team, and Travis Kelce showing his age, and all of these things, they still end up winning the division and are probably going to be 10-7, 11-6 to finish the season. Chris Jones, after the win, was talking about everybody, I guess, talking about the fans, talking about the media, saying that they counted out the Chiefs and all that kind of stuff, the division winners again. And he's like, Jamar Chase, try again, because the Chiefs have basically owned the Bengals. And I'm like, how are you going to talk trash about another player's receiver when he doesn't even have his best quarterback? Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting, but I don't think that. Yeah, there's no way the Bengals can even make the playoffs, so they're completely out. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is pretty much everything within the AFC. We previewed a couple of these games already going on, but I mean, when it comes to betting, I'm kind of scared. We talked about it. Like, I'm not exactly sure who and who's not going to play when it comes to incentives, when it comes to injury, when it comes to resting. Like, it's kind of a
Yep.
scary week for betting.
So, can I interest you in the Jets and Patriots game?
Why would you want
Um,
to do such a thing? Like, that's a
so
sign of an addict.
What do you mean, dude? Listen to this, okay? Our boy Big B's out the door, right? And so I think it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be a situation similar to what we saw with Lovie Smith last year,
Mm-hmm.
where they're already out the door, they already know they're gonna be fired. Why not just win? You know what I mean? Like they basically been trying the past few weeks and stuff, and what like sure you shouldn't. This is the problem with week 18 is you shouldn't base your bets on motivation and everything like that, or like teams trying to tank, because every team's always going to try to do their best to win. No player is going to purposefully like play bad, because a lot of players on these bad
Unless you're the
teams,
Texans.
well, I guess, but a lot of players on these bad teams, they also have incentives. They also have contracts to be played for in the upcoming off season. So they want to play good. They want to play their best, and so they're not gonna be thinking about, oh man, like actually we can't play too good because then we're not gonna get Caleb Williams. Like they're not. That's not going through their head, even though they may be thinking that in as the Jets fan, because they might not want Aaron Rodgers back with all of his drama, or they sure as hell don't want Zach
They're
Wilson
gonna want
back.
him back.
So so but yeah, I mean this probably not I'm not doing it, but
No,
I just thought it was
no.
interesting that Big Bill on the way out,
Yeah,
I just one last hoorah for the old skipper.
it's interesting. It's honestly an interesting dynamic, but yeah, I want nothing to
Hmm.
do with that game. The only other game within the AFC, other than the Buffalo Bills and the Dolphins, that I'm interested in is the Colts Texans, just because I think it's going to be an entertaining game, and there's like honestly so much that went into that game. So you had C.J. Stroud, who obviously we talked about was the second overall pick, and is now has a chance to lead his team to the playoffs, versus the Colts, who are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. They draft Anthony Richardson, who looks great with within this first 2 weeks, but can't slide to save his life, and he thinks that he's just Marshawn Lynch and trying to run over everybody. Gets hurt and has the season-ending injury, and then enter Gardner Minshew, who honestly, as of right now, is basically playing for a starting job next season. Somebody's probably going to pick him up because he's honestly been playing great. So if he's able to lead the Colts to the playoffs, it's both dynamic. So it's very interesting. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that game was, and if you had a favorite. Obviously, the Texans are still going to be playing without Tank Dell, as I believe he's still battling or still has his season-ending injury. And I think the Colts are pretty much fully healthy. But what were your thoughts on that game? Currently, Houston is favored by 1, so it's pretty much a pick 'em.
Yeah. So, actually, wait. Oh, never mind. I completely skipped over the game that you were talking about. I was looking at the Jacksonville game. I was like, favored by 1. That's interesting. Anyways, going back to what you were actually talking about in the Colts. See, so that's where the motivation is there, and they also have Shane Steichen, who, if you're just going based off of like coaching matchups, like it's a pick 'em. I'm gonna go with the better coach in that sense. However, you also have D'Amico Ryans on the other side too, who's been doing an exquisite job of coaching up his team on offense and also on defense.
He's going to get some Coach of the Year honors. Not going to win, but he's going to get some honors, some votes.
Absolutely. And then I go over to the bet splits, and I see this disgusting 71% of the bets on the Texans. I cannot, in good faith and knowing what I know about bet splits, I know too much to make this mistake. Probably not gonna. I think I'm like dying. Hold on, again, man. That's happened last week too. Jesus. But yeah, so I know too much. I've been faltered and floundered before, and I made the mistake when I took the against my better judgment. I took the Eagles against the Seahawks, even though it was like 80% of the bets, and I was like, dude, it's Drew Lock out there. I think there's no fucking way. And then I got what I deserved.
Yep.
And so I'm probably not going to be on this game.
No,
at least not right now. I gotta see more before I go any further with Gardner Minshew. I've already backed him a few too many times, and with the spread only being 1, that makes me nervous. When it was against the,
aren't you usually voting against Gardner Minshew? And then there's that one game where
I backed him a couple times.
Okay,
yeah, it was like
the mustache.
Yeah, there was like I think 3 games I've been on him. There was like the first time I was on him was after I had talked about that trend where he basically hadn't won like anything in any of his starts, and then of course that was like his first win in like 14 games. I was like, dude, are you kidding me?
Yeah, hold my beer.
Literally. But yeah, I mean, last week that was just like the easiest bet to make because the Raiders were coming off of a Super Bowl victory against the the Chiefs, so it was a major letdown spot for them. But looking at this right now, 21% of the bets on the Colts. I can only look the way of the Colts, even though it's another dog to fave line move, but it's the line to open up was 1.5 or 1 for the Texans. So that's not real. Like it was basically a pick 'em. And that doesn't really tell me all that much. Yeah. But yeah, as far as like Gardner Minshew and Shane Steichen goes, a lot of their games, they do play a lot of overs. So that would be another angle to look at for sure. But again, I don't want anything to do with this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not betting on this game either. If I had to choose one, I think I would want. I don't know. I just want CJ Stroud to be successful, be Rookie of the Year. Yeah, I want them in the playoffs. So I mean, I would root for the Texans if I had to choose one, but I'm not going to be betting on this. But both good franchises.
I think you should do it. I think you should do it.
Do what?
Take the Texans.
I am taking the Texans. I'm just not betting on them.
No, bet it.
I'll bet you. I
don't want to do that.
I'm not gonna inform the people to take this pick because I don't want it. I'm scared. But 2 good franchises that I think that have very solid futures.
Side note real quick. Something interesting that I just noticed here.
Uh-oh.
Remember how I always talk about how the game's won and lost in the trenches. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you look over at the matchup between Indy and Houston, and you see on the offensive line when it comes to pass blocking, um, the Colts, yeah, -1 efficiency there. And then on the rushing side, 21% advantage against the Houston defense there. And then you scroll down a little further, you go over to Houston on offense, and you see a negative 24% disadvantage on the offensive line when it comes to pass protection.
You should take him, bro.
And then and a negative 29% disadvantage when it comes to run blocking.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the Texans are one of the most run heavy or one of the most pass heavy teams in the league, going up against a Shane Steichen defense that, sure, they give up a lot of points, but they also have a pretty damn good defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Their secondary is usually the problem, but if they're not able to protect Stroud back there, it doesn't matter what the secondary has going on if they can't even get the ball to them. And then you have the injuries on with the wide receivers too. I mean, it is tempting. I need to see more before I do it, but I might do it.
I'm also excited to see this Colts offense next year when Anthony Richardson comes back, hopefully fully healthy. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Taylor will be a year removed from all of his major injuries, so hopefully he'll be fully healthy, along with Pittman and Downs, who's come on for a very good rookie. And then same thing on the Texans, and you have C.J. Stroud, and then I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do at running back because a lot of people had, including me, had a lot of confidence in Dameon Pierce, but Devin Singletary of all people was like, nah, I'm the better running back. So that was kind of gross. But Nico Collins, Tank Dell, I mean, even the tight end, what was his name that ended up coming from the Cowboys? Schultz too.
Dalton Schultz.
So,
speaking of Schultz, he also has some incentives as well going into this season. If he is a $25,000 bonus for 60 receptions, he's currently at 54. So if you're looking at some props, that might be something to look at. Six receptions right there. The last thing that I want to get into when it comes to the NFL,
mm-hmm.
I had to do it. You know.
Broncos country. Let's ride.
Okay. Any early predictions on where you think that Russ may end up?
You had brought up the Saints.
Yeah.
I don't hate it. I would actually kind of prefer anything else than whatever the hell is going on there. And also get rid of Dennis Allen too, because that man cannot coach. He probably couldn't coach a Pee Wee football team either. It's one of those things where you have a coordinator that moves into the head coaching position, and it just doesn't end up working out. And it's not any fault of like, oh, they're not good at being a coordinator anymore. Like they don't know what they're doing. They're still good coordinators, and they're still like good at what they do. But when it comes to a head coaching job, it's completely different. And we're seeing that. We saw that with Brandon Staley. Well, he also kind of helped when he had the Rams' elite talent on the defensive end too. That helped him with his case as a coordinator. But with Dennis Allen, when he was the coordinator for the Saints, the defensive coordinator, that is, he was doing a great job and everything. They would always be holding teams to less than at least 21 points. And now it's like the problem is the offense. Like they can't move the ball, and they're not playing the right players. Derek Carr, I'm not even sure why I'm talking about the Saints now. You got me all talking about the Saints and how I'm talking about the Broncos and stuff. You got me going down rabbit holes, man.
Nobody wants to go to the Saints, Drew. I'm just gonna let you know that right now.
I think that he does.
I don't think he does. I think that would probably be like the sixth option. I was just saying it hypothetically just because y'all need a quarterback. Yep. But like I said previously, you guys aren't in a position to – I don't think you guys are ready to unload Derek Carr's contract. I think you at least have to play with him, play him for another year because, that would be a lot of money that y'all would have to eat. And I don't think that plus, the situation – I love Chris Olave, and he's a great young receiver, but, Michael Thomas is aging. Alvin Kamara seems to have lost a step. not exactly sure what's going on with that. But currently, one of the favorites right now for Russ would be the Falcons, which is understandable because anything is better than Desmond Ridder, I guess, other maybe than Zach Wilson. I don't know. Raiders as well, and then it would be Patriots, and then Steelers, then lastly Commanders. But they got Sam Howell, so they don't need Russ, so it's okay,
bro. I almost just like yacked. I mean,
I understand the Falcons more than anything, though, especially with the weapons that they have.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was gonna say is like I would assume that he would want to go to a team that has potential to make the playoffs and potential to, do something successful. Because I mean, if you go to Washington, like they're not going to be like, sure they have Terry McLaurin and stuff like that, but like they're not going to be doing all that much going forward. Well, okay, yeah, that's great, but also where's the offensive line and how are they going to stop anybody on defense? Okay,
don't worry about that. Backyard football.
Yep. And I don't think that New England is going to be a good spot either because like they're going the wrong direction right now. They're not playing for a future, and Russ would have to stay there for a few years until they would actually turn stuff around. Did you also say the Raiders too?
I could potentially see the Raiders. They still have weapons with Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, and you would still keep it within division. That would kind of, have a little extra incentive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that they would. Well, they don't really have a choice, but
just get rid of him. But Jimmy G ain't the answer, and he's hurt. And then what's his name?
Your boy Aiden O'Connell.
He is not my boy. I had faith. I voted for him once. Had faith in him once. He let me down. Never again. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah. So and then I heard stories about the Vikings being a potential spot because of Kirk Cousins and everything, and we saw how how the backups look for them. So and I think that's a team where like they're just a few pieces away from making some serious noise, and you have. Sure, Russ is also aging, but technically, if you want to get into technicalities, everybody's aging. But Kirk Cousins specifically is coming off of an Achilles rupture, so that's not something that you want out of your starting quarterback. And they've been trying to get rid of him for years, but then he keeps on playing just slightly too well, and then he has like little flashes, and he's like,
underrated.
"Oh, actually,
underrated."
Yeah, well. He's exactly what we think he is. This year he was very underrated. I'll give you that. Because like dude was balling out and like was unapologetic about it. He's like, "You like that?" And so and I did like that for a while. I had Jordan Addison on my team. So but yeah, I think those spots definitely be interesting. I think the Falcons would be probably the best spot for him, honestly.
Now that you bring up the Vikings, though, I don't necessarily think that. I agree. I think the Falcons are the best spot for him. But, with the Vikings and their situation, they had talked about with Justin Jefferson that he wasn't ready to re-sign because he wanted to see what the team would look like in this last season with Kirk Cousins and if they could actually be a contender. Now that he's had the Achilles rupture, now we're past the Dobbs experience and all of this situation, like where do they go? Because they have, as you mentioned, they don't have the best running game with Alexander Madison, but they have a dynamic passing core with Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson, especially if they're able to re-sign Jefferson, which I think they probably will. Where do they go at quarterback, though? That's what I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, and that's where Russ comes into play.
Gardner Minshew.
Because, like, bro, because like, I mean, this year we saw how the scoring has been way down, and that's because of all the changes at quarterback and all the quarterback injuries, and then also just the piss poor play, to be honest. Like, so you take all that into consideration. You're like, there's got to be like some good quarterback out there, like a comparable quarterback that won't give me 4 interceptions. And I think they do like Nick Mullins because he does push the ball down the field. Sure, he'll give you. Okay, they tolerate him. I'll say maybe not like they tolerate him. Okay. Anyways, they like he'll give you 4 touchdowns, but it'll also give you maybe like 3 to 5 picks. He's got a lot of Jameis in him, so to
Yep.
speak. So, do
Speaking
you
of
think?
Jameis, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, do you think a return of Cameron Newton would be in the
No,
cards?
no, no,
You don't think any team?
no. I think that Cam Newton is far from starter talent at this point, and I think that he has way too much of an ego to be a backup, regardless of what he says on his podcast and things of that nature. Just the amount of attention that it would bring to, like, imagine like starting the season and you go 0-2 and 0-3, and then you have Cam Newton as your backup, and all of the negative attention and drama that would come along with it. I just don't think that franchises are really trying to do that. But side note, you brought up Jameis Winston, has really nothing to do with Jameis Winston, but with the Buccaneers, I wanted to talk to you about Baker Mayfield has now have a chance to secure the division and take the Buccaneers to playoffs. But if he loses this game and a couple other things happen within the NFC, he also has a chance to completely miss the playoffs entirely. He currently is about 4,000 yards, top 10. He has 28 touchdowns on the season. He has 10 interceptions, and he has basically a QBR that's right in the middle when it comes to starting quarterbacks. Do you think that the Baker Mayfield experience with the Buccaneers has been a success? And do you think that going forward that they should potentially re-sign him, or because he's like right there, like, I don't know. I feel like if you make the playoffs, maybe you win one upset game, then obviously, but like as of right now, like which way do you go? There's not much time. Mike Evans has been great. Another season, 1,000 yards, but he's aging. Chris Godwin's aging. Shaun White looks good, but
and I talked about this like beginning of the season actually, and that was that this year he finally has an offense that he's comfortable controlling, and he's familiar with the offense and how it works. He's been there already, and an offensive line that'll protect him. And that's the biggest thing too, because usually we're used to seeing Baker, scrambling for his life or snapping the ball, and then as soon as the ball touches his hands, there's a defender in his face. So, I think that definitely plays a major factor in his success this year, and that's one of the reasons why Tom Brady was successful as a Buccaneer as well, because they always had a solid offensive line. That being said, it's tough because like what Baker is like, and he's just Baker. Like he's in that category, the Matthew Padford category.
He's not.
He's he's extremely average. Okay, he's a little bit below me.
Do you know that everything that Matthew Stafford's done, that he actually has a potential to make the Hall of Fame? Like the amount of MVP seasons that he's been, or not MVP seasons, the amount of like elite seasons that he's been able to produce for his wide receivers, albeit his wide receivers have been elite and stuff like that, but being able to have like 2 or 3 of the best wide receiver seasons coming from Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl, tons of stop it. I don't stop it. Do you think that the Bucs should re-sign Baker Mayfield? Yes or no? And we'll say it without having to mention Matthew Stafford.
I was messing with you, but yeah, I do think that he's shown that he can lead the offense, and he shows that he can be a comparable quarterback when his weapons are healthy and he has the offensive line to protect him, and he's doing all this without a real running game either, which is typically what helps
Shaun
out
White's
a lot
been pretty good.
Dude, he's been getting passes out of the backfield and then just...
Well, that's all the Buccaneers have always done, whether it be with Leonard Fournette or whether it be with James White.
He's no Kyron Williams or...
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't think he's bad. Solid.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think... I sometimes I get these vendettas against players because of what they do to me in fantasy football.
He's almost at 1,000 yards this season. That's pretty solid.
It just doesn't feel like it.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, to be fair, they also have one. Yes, but to be fair, they also have one of the worst run offenses in the league. So that's that. Anyways, with Baker, according to Pro Football Focus, he's the 19th ranked quarterback this year, which is below Derek Carr and below our boy Russell Wilson. And even Jordan Love. Wow, Jordan Love's climbing up there, climbing the ladder.
I just don't think they have many better options in free agency than what you already have with Baker.
That's the thing. that's the thing too, which I was gonna get to before you so rudely interrupted me.
God damn, hurry up, get to me, shit.
Because because when, like I said, it doesn't matter when you draft a quarterback necessarily, because it doesn't always correlate to like an elite quarterback being coming out of the draft. So nobody knows anything when it comes to these things. Who knows? Caleb Williams could be trash. He could be Bryce Young. So like like who knows what's in the draft? Why not go with a known commodity that you know what you're going to get each and every week? You take the lumps and bruises with his interceptions and his mistakes, but you also take the good along with that, and the plays that he does make that end up winning games, I think will be beneficial for the Bucs, at least in this time period for now, and then reassessing it in another year. Speaking of our boy Baker Mayfield, he also has some incentives. So let's see here. So 300K in each of the categories if he finishes top 10 or top 5 in the NFC. Top 10 in the NFL or top 5 in the NFC. So if he finishes in those categories at passer rating, TD passes,
Check.
passing yards, passing completion percentage,
no,
and then also yards per pass attempt. So he's ninth in passer rating right now, and he's fifth in the NFC. So right now he has that NFC incentive in the bag. And then when it comes to passing touchdowns, he's currently fourth in the NFL and fourth in the NFC. Passing yards, he's eighth in the NFL and fifth in the NFC. And then completion percentage, he's 18th, and then 10th in the NFC. Finally, yards per pass attempt, he's currently ninth in the NFL and sixth in the NFC. So right now he has all of those incentives met, except for the completion percentage. So I think that he's showing that he's meeting their standards, and he's meeting what they expected out of him, and arguably he's surpassing that because all of the incentives that he had there he's meeting. So
right.
Like,
let me sling this motherfucker around.
Mm-hmm. So I mean that'd be one of the reasons why I kind of like him to go over it, whatever props he has this week, because I think he's going to be trying to maintain that stuff there. So
facts, I agree. And then I was just looking at the stats, but is Mike Evans like the most underrated receiver of our era? Like really, like this man has played with Jameis, and we know 30 for 30 Jameis. He's playing with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Obviously played with Brady. He's had other backup quarterbacks, and now he's played with Baker. And all he does is have 1,000 yards every year and probably double-digit touchdowns every year. He's top 10 in yards this season. He's leading touchdowns, like literally.
Mm-hmm.
But he's never mentioned in the best wide receiver in the league conversation, or even in the top 5. But I was watching, looking at some stats. Like since he's come in the league, if you look at his stats compared to Davante Adams, they're nearly identical. And Mike Evans has done it in less games with less receptions. Like, but nobody ever talks about Mike Evans like they do with Davante Adams. And Davante had just one of the best quarterbacks of all time for the majority of his prime, while Mike Evans was playing with mediocrity until Tom Brady came.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as we know in fantasy football, the best thing to have if you're drafting a wide receiver is a gunslinger, and just anybody that just says F it and just throw it, and that's what he's had like during his career, except for Tom Brady, who was actually accurate when he was slinging that thing. Exactly. So I mean, Fitzpatrick, like we know what he does. Jameis fits the bill. Baker, yep. So I mean, all these quarterbacks, they are literally just like huck it and chuck it, and just hope that Mike Evans comes down with it, and he usually does, because he is a very good receiver, and probably I'd say a Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame wide receiver,
easily.
Because I mean, you put up 1,000, you roll out of bed, and you get 1,000 yards every year. So like, yeah, that's a good question though. I'm not sure. I think it's because of the success that Davante Adams has had, and success in terms of team success. Because a lot of the time, okay, you're telling with the Packers,
one Super Bowl.
Okay, and what I'm saying is that they've also made it to the the division,
Divisional.
not divisional. What am I thinking of? The conference. There we go. Conference championship multiple times. And when it comes
Lost
to
every time.
okay, but they still made it, and he's still
true,
gone
I
off.
understand.
And yeah,
Mike Evans
and
is the king of
with
7 and
Mike
9 with
Evans,
the Bucs.
exactly. So I think that's an exposure kind of thing too. And yeah.
Fair enough. Is there anything else that you wanted to get into in the NFL?
I mean, we brought up my Broncos. We didn't really talk about it.
What do you want to talk about?
Actually, there's actually not really much I want to talk about, but I would like to highlight the fact that one of the things to look for in Week 18, like I mentioned before, is incentives to keep playing hard for teams, even though the Broncos have nothing to play for, and same with the Raiders have nothing to play for. The Raiders are playing to try and keep their head coach or their interim head coach on the team and on the squad, so they're going to be playing hard for him. And then, as we know, with our boy Sean Payton, he's going to be out there trying to do everything he can to make Russell Wilson look like the problem and not himself. So I think that that's going to be one of those things to look at when it comes to picking that matchup. Yeah,
I'll be so mad that if come next season the Raiders are just like, yeah, introducing this new press conference head coach. Like, I don't know what more Antonio Pierce needs to do for them. Like, he's completely turned them around. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like, but apparently last week, after the loss, they had a conversation, a long conversation, talking about his future.
Would you want him to go undefeated and then fucking go to the Super Bowl? Like,
yes.
What do you want him to? Do you know how bad they were? Like, I don't.
Man, well,
tough.
For before we get into the NFL, just for one last time,
Broncos country, let's ride.
Alrighty.
Moving on. The only thing that we were going to get into, touch on a little bit, was these college football playoff matchups that we had. We had Alabama taking on Michigan. For a lot of people, when it came to the committee decision in putting Alabama as opposed to Georgia or Florida State, whatever the case may be, ended up being a very good game. Michigan ended up winning ultimately in overtime, and now they are facing Washington, who ended up beating Texas, and I thought was going to basically take the game completely over and go on this like multiple touchdown game. And it looked like it was going to match up that way, but they ended up being a punt fumble and all this kind of stuff. But they ended up holding on. Texas did have a chance to go on a game-winning drive, and Washington almost gave it away, but ended up winning 31-37. So now it is going to be Michigan, Washington. Any thoughts on that, Drew, or any thoughts on the past two games? I know you hate all of these teams, so it's okay.
Well, you want to talk about like almost pissing a game away? Just look no further than Washington. Yep. I think maybe it's like a Seattle thing. Like, you guys just love to.
And they just knew the ratings were. They knew how many people were watching. They wanted to give them some entertaining. Who wants to see a blowout? They're tired of seeing all these college blowouts.
Bro, I guess, man. But yeah, I mean, the games over the weekend where. Well, I don't want to call them good, because the LSU game was all right. It was actually kind of good, but other than that, 35-0 Tennessee over Iowa, and then 45-6 Oregon over Liberty. So I mean,
playoff.
Yeah. But an interesting note though on that is that there is a trend, if you will, called, basically, if you have two ranked teams, just take the favorite. And last week that did pretty well. Tennessee was favored by 5.5. Didn't matter. They won by 35. Oregon was favored by 19. Didn't matter. They won by 39. So, and then you have the Alabama-Michigan game here, where Michigan was favored, despite all of the love for the Tide looking to roll over the Wolverines.
Tide, baby.
Exactly. And so, which is why I personally took Michigan in this game. Only 43% of the bets, and the most heavily bet game of the season. Easy money.
One of the most viewed college football games since like the 80s.
Exactly.
College football is back. I don't know if it left.
Next year will be even better.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and then you have Washington. This was the only game where you have that two ranked teams take the favorite. Washington ended up getting the job done in this game. And
Yes.
dude, Penix is like,
I don't know how people aren't
dude's a
talking about
dog.
him as like a top 5 first round draft pick, whatever like that. A lot of people, when they did their mocks
Mhm.
like just a couple weeks ago, didn't have him in the first round at all. Maybe late first round, but not even in the first round. So like, I don't understand that. Like 5 other quarterbacks are projected to go higher than him. Each man is slinging it. Albeit Washington does have a lot of
That's
good
crazy.
receivers. One of them is going in the first round, but Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah.
is him.
And
Tell me,
who's that wide receiver that UW has too?
Dunze?
Number 1. Yeah, Dunze. Dude, he
Him.
like he's him. Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Tell me who you're taking in
but,
this
yeah.
championship game, though, Drew.
So, all
Mm.
that to say
Mm.
that, I grew up in Washington, and Michael Penix has a great season, Heisman winner and everything, and
Should have been the Heisman winner.
but
He didn't get it.
That's true. My bad. That's
Trash.
right. That yeah, because the West Coast never gets any love.
Facts.
But in terms of West Coast never getting any love, I don't think they're going to get any love in this game, except for on the bet splits. So they're getting 60% of the bets. 60% of the bets.
That's because
I think that this
everybody's out here
dog
favoring Michigan.
has fleas.
Okay.
This dog has fleas, Mr. Harris.
All right.
All right. While I do own a Husky.
Mind you, Texas was favored by the same amount that Michigan is favored right. Texas was favored over Washington by the same amount that Michigan is currently favored over Washington. Just saying.
That's fine.
We should have easily made a blowout with that.
But in that game, also, the line was moving towards Washington. And Washington was also and Washington also had a pretty good bet split as well. Unlike in this game where they're getting 60% of the bets and only 51% of the money, which is a negative bet split, which you don't want, especially in a championship game. I'm taking Michigan -4. No, I'm not. I'm taking Michigan money line. I don't be messing around with those short favors.
Give me Washington. I want 4.5 though. Give me Washington 4.5 right now.
Between me and you, I'll do the 4.5. But what we're putting in our picks, I am taking Michigan money line.
Okay,
it is -185. I don't care. I'll take it. Bet.
It's writing on the wall. Like, actually, there's a lot of history or potential history on both sides of this. Michigan, with their whole scandal and Harbaugh cheating and all that kind of stuff earlier this season, the suspension. Now people are saying they don't know if Harbaugh is going to go to the NFL, whatever the case may be. Michigan hasn't won the championship since like the 80s or 70s, something like that. Washington's never won a championship. Last season in the Pac-12, Washington's about to go to the Big Ten, all this kind of stuff. Don't care. Go Dogs. And we're saying this with I got my master's from Washington State University, so I'm a Husky a Cougar technically, and Drew went to OSU, so he's a Beaver. So I mean, I guess it makes sense for you not to choose, but it's local. Drew, you at least who wants to root for Michigan?
Well, it's not about who I want to root for. It's about who I want my money to be behind, and I want my money to be behind the number 1 team in the nation. And also and fading the trendy dog is what I want to do. So I am taking Michigan. Washington is 7-6 against the spread. I mean, Michigan isn't much better, 8-5, but that is still better last time I checked. So on offense, they're scoring 36 points per game. They're only giving up 10 points per game, and versus Washington, who's scoring 37.6, which is good. 1.6 points better. I can do math, but they're also giving out 24.1 points per game as well. So I'm going to bank on the defensive prowess that Michigan has. And I think that they're going to get the job done. Yeah. And so, especially Washington's coming off of a big upset against Texas.
Not an upset.
It's a letdown. Well, it can't really have a letdown spot in a championship game, but I do think that it was a huge game for them. And versus Michigan, who, they had a little bit of a scare there in the overtime thriller, but I think that Michigan is more equipped for this game. So
Alabama was up by a touchdown. True. All they needed was to get one more first down. They didn't get that. Then all they needed was a stop. Couldn't get that. Then they just needed to match in overtime. Couldn't get that. But I definitely understand.
And
I
why
think that
couldn't they get
Michigan,
that, Alex? Why couldn't they get that?
because they shit the bed.
Because of Michigan.
I think that I do understand why Michigan is favored. I think that they should be favored. As you mentioned, they have the much better defense. Obviously, Washington has the better offense, but Michigan definitely wins in the trenches when it comes to offensive line and defensive line. So I completely understand it. There's also been a lot of talk about Michigan, being what a national champion looks like, having numerous upsets, having big wins against ranked teams. Other than Oregon, Washington hasn't had that many formidable wins. Obviously, other than Texas that they just had, beaten Oregon twice. But they've had 8 games this year where they've won by single digits, so single digit wins. They're 8-0 in close score games, and going back to last season, they're 12-0. So, I mean, I do understand that they are the dog, they are the Cinderella story in this situation, but yeah, they're still gonna win. That's all.
Okay.
They at least gonna cover. They're gonna cover.
Okay, so they ain't gotta win. They just gotta cover.
I want them to win.
Good teams win. Great teams cover.
The head coach at our college and stuff too is from Michigan, that area and stuff like that too. So he is a diehard Michigan fan. So we had practice the other day, and he was literally going to the weight room every 5 minutes in the middle of practice to check the score because it was during the Alabama game. And sweating the whole time.
Dude,
Michigan finally wins. Wasn't nervous at all. It's fine. I was nervous at all.
Dude, I was on a hike while that game was going on because we went a little bit too far on our hike, so we didn't come back in time for the game. And so I'm like checking the scores. I'm like, oh my god! And it's just, are you on your phone? I'm like, no, I'm just I'm seeing, making sure we're on the right path. And
got my compass app right here. I'm just kind of
exactly
south, right? We're going south.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Moral of the story is Michigan's gonna win and roll. Maybe not roll, but they'll win. So
don't get pissed about nothing but the tide, baby. Anyway. That will, unless you have anything else.
No, I don't. That's all I got for this edition of the Collar Shot podcast. And be sure that you're downloading the podcast, checking us out on YouTube, and following us on the Instagram account. So, do you have anything else other than just the usual?
Let's ride.
Nope. Thanks for listening, everybody. Alex Harris, Drew Moore, and we'll see y'all next week. Deuces.
Peace.
Delete that Bronco shit, bro.